I hate everything about you." My husband spat the words, his parents nodding eagerly beside him. Just like that, they kicked me out of the luxurious apartment I paid for, the one we moved into with them after my investments let him quit his stressful job. He even cheated. How did my success and support lead to betrayal? Watch the full story to see how I got my revenge. Like, subscribe, and tell us what you would do in the comments. My name is Clara, and I guess you could say I'm a 34-year-old homemaker, though things got a bit more complicated than that. I'd been married to my husband Daniel for 5 years. We didn't have any children and had always lived on our own, just the two of us as a couple. After graduating from college, Daniel found a job at a company, but it turned out to be one of those places with absolutely terrible working conditions. He was forced to work from early in the morning until late at night, every single day, and it was clearly taking a huge toll on him, both mentally and physically. Watching him struggle, I started searching for something I could do from home, anything to help ease the pressure on him. Initially, I found some online jobs like data entry tasks, earning about the same as a typical part-time job, but I wanted to contribute more, so I began teaching myself video editing. Gradually, as I started getting jobs from clients, I managed to save up a little money. With those savings, I decided to try my hand at investing. My everyday life soon revolved around studying the markets, particularly FX trading, gaining experience, and saving the money from my video editing work. It took a few years of this dedicated effort, but eventually I started making quite a bit of money from my investments. FX trading seemed to be a good fit for me. Although there were risks, being home all day meant I could always monitor my computer screen and track everything closely. Seeing how well things were going financially for me, I approached Daniel. "Honey," I started hesitantly, "I know your job is awful. You don't have to force yourself anymore. I've actually been doing really well with my investments, plus the editing work. We have enough income now. Maybe you could quit?" At first, Daniel just stared at me, a puzzled look on his face. No, he said. "Our finances are fine because of my job. What you earn is just pocket money, right?" I explained again, showing him proof of my earnings. "Seriously? You mean it? I can really quit?" His face lit up. "Thank you." He seemed overjoyed, and later happily told me he'd submitted his resignation. I felt happy too, hoping this would make him feel better and improve our marriage. However, things took a turn I hadn't expected. "Hey," Daniel said one evening, "can we move in with my parents?" "Huh? Wait, you mean move to their house?" I asked, confused. "With my earnings, we can live comfortably like this. There's no need." "No, that's not it," he clarified, pulling out a glossy flyer. "Look at this new high-rise apartment building. We can rent a place there, and my parents, Richard and Susan, can live with us." My jaw dropped. "Are you serious? The rent is $5,000 a month. That's way too expensive." "But you're earning so much from investments, right?" he pressed. "You can afford it easily. It's time I took care of my parents." I reluctantly agreed, but a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. We moved into the stunning high-rise apartment, and initially, Richard and Susan were absolutely thrilled. "Wow, Clara! Daniel! What an amazing place!" Susan gushed, admiring the city view. "The scenery is just beautiful." They were like excited kids on moving day. "I'm so proud of you, Daniel," Richard beamed, "making so much money to afford this luxury." I nudged Daniel, feeling awkward. He cleared his throat. "Well, actually, Dad, Clara's the one paying the rent. She's doing really well with her investments." Richard and Susan just stared, their smiles freezing. What? It's Clara's earnings. At first they were almost overly apologetic towards me, making me feel a bit uncomfortable. I told Daniel to tell them not to worry, explaining I started investing to help him out initially. I thought maybe this would make them happy and, in turn, make Daniel happy too. Big mistake. Once they got over the initial shock, their attitudes became incredibly bold. Suddenly it was, "Clara, I like my pasta cooked a bit softer," from Susan, or, "Clara, bring me a beer and that specific brand of mayonnaise," from Richard. Then came the bigger demands. "Clara, I saw this lovely designer handbag. Could you buy it for me?" And, "Daniel needs a new set of high-end golf clubs." They started treating me like a personal ATM combined with a housekeeper. I put my foot down immediately regarding the expensive gifts. "I'll do my best with the chores," I stated firmly, "but I won't be buying luxury items." My refusal definitely didn't sit well with them. Since I refused to buy them everything they pointed at, Richard and Susan started complaining about me to Daniel behind my back, though not very quietly. "How come she's just home all day on that computer?" I'd overhear Susan whine. "She says she earns a lot, but I doubt it's real work. It's probably just gambling, sheer luck, and she acts so proud." Daniel, unfortunately, seemed to soak it all up. He'd changed jobs, finding something less demanding with no overtime, but also with lower pay. Since I covered the rent and living costs, his entire salary became disposable income. Suddenly he was obsessed with fashion, his wardrobe filled with tailor-made suits, expensive brand-name shoes, and designer bags. He'd always liked fashion, but now he could indulge himself freely, and he reveled in it. Because he was living so large, his parents started complaining to him about why they couldn't have the same luxurious items. This led to him pressuring me again. "Clara, it's part of taking care of them. Just buy them what they want." I stood firm. "If you want to take care of them, Daniel, use your own money. You have plenty of free cash now. It's a perfect opportunity for you to show them you care." He frowned, unable to argue because I was right. But buying things for his parents would cut into his own luxury fund, so he kept pushing me. Since I continued to refuse, Daniel became increasingly harsh. "You just sit stuck in front of that computer," he'd snap. "You don't even wear makeup anymore. You think you can let yourself go just because you work from home? If you keep dressing like that, we won't be a good match." His words started getting really nasty. As Daniel grew colder and my in-laws bolder with their complaints, I felt increasingly isolated in my own home, the home I was paying for. Richard and Susan started complaining directly to me. "Why can't you cook better, Clara?" Susan would demand. "You might make money, but you're no good as a wife if you can't manage the house properly." Richard would nod in agreement. "You need to do your duties." I'd finally had enough. "Look," I retorted one evening, my voice shaking slightly. "It's thanks to my earnings that you're all living like this in this expensive apartment. Susan, you're perfectly healthy, but don't lift a finger around here. And Richard, you quit your job too, right? What would happen to any of you if I were gone? I'm not asking for respect, but I certainly don't deserve these constant complaints." They just stood there, faces turning red, sputtering, but unable to say anything because they knew it was true. After that, things got even worse. They resorted to whispering loudly about me whenever I wasn't in the same room. It was during this tense period that I witnessed the final blow. I decided to take a break one day and met up with a friend downtown. As we were walking near some high-end fashion stores, I happened to see Daniel stepping out of one. "Buying more luxury stuff again," I thought bitterly. But then, A young woman emerged from the store behind him, smiling and linking her arm intimately through his. My heart sank. I quickly pulled my friend into the shadows, took out my phone, and snapped several photos. I was completely numb with shock. I knew things were bad between us, but I never thought he'd actually cheat. Something inside me just snapped. I didn't want to be with a man like that, or his parents anymore. From that day on, I started looking for a one-bedroom apartment just for myself, and stopped doing any housework whatsoever. My decision to stop doing housework entirely threw the apartment into chaos, and the tension became unbearable. Richard and Susan were completely furious, and Daniel was equally angry. It all came to a head one evening when they cornered me in the living room. "What is with your attitude lately, Clara?" Daniel spat, his face tight with anger. "Everything you do just makes me angry. Mom and Dad are right. You're getting way too carried away, too cocky just because you make some money." Susan chimed in, her voice shrill. "I hate everything about you. You're useless as a wife." Richard nodded sternly. "We only live with our own family here," Daniel declared, his voice cold. "So leave. Right now." To my surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have been, they were actually kicking me out. Daniel then did something almost polite in a twisted way. He pulled out official-looking documents. "I even prepared the divorce papers for you," he said flatly. "I've already filled out my part. Hurry up and sign them." Honestly, while it wasn't something I ever wished for, it felt like a massive weightlifting. This was my escape hatch, handed to me on a silver platter. Without hesitation, I took the pen and signed the papers right there. "Well done," Susan sneered. "Now get out quickly." As I started packing a bag with essentials, they were already celebrating loudly behind me. "Finally, this house is ours," Daniel exclaimed. "Let's order some expensive dinner." I just focused on my packing, calmly telling them I'd arrange for movers to get the rest of my things another day. Their smug, victorious looks were almost comical. They had no idea what was coming. I returned to my parents' house temporarily. A few days later, I arranged for movers and went back to the high-rise apartment to retrieve the rest of my belongings. As the last boxes were being carried out, Daniel, Richard, and Susan stood watching, smug looks plastered on their faces. "So now this place is completely ours," Daniel said with a huge grin. "Oh, by the way," I replied calmly, turning to face them, "we haven't quite finished talking about the divorce." I then reached into my bag and laid out the clear, undeniable photos of Daniel with the other woman right on the coffee table. "What is—" Daniel stammered, his face instantly draining of color as he recognized the pictures. Richard and Susan peered closer, their expressions turning to pale horror. "No way. How did you—" Daniel whispered, mortified. "You really thought you wouldn't get caught, parading around town with her clinging to your arm?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Honestly, Daniel. Anyway, we will get divorced, but only after I receive proper alimony for your infidelity. And since almost all our assets came from my earnings, there will be no division of property." Susan gasped. "Ignore her, Daniel," Richard suddenly interjected, puffing out his chest. "We have a way to get back at her. We'll show her." Daniel nodded eagerly, regaining some foolish confidence. "That's right. If I invest about $50,000 in margin trading, I can make hundreds of thousands, practically overnight." I almost warned them about the risks of such gambling, but stopped myself. They wouldn't listen anyway. Let them learn the hard way. Surprisingly, They readily agreed to pay the alimony lump sum immediately and forgo any property division, likely planning their big market play right after. I simply nodded, gathered my last few things, and walked out, leaving them to their impending disaster. The alimony payment arrived promptly, just as they'd agreed. I immediately invested it wisely, building on the portfolio I already had. Thanks to that boost, my investments continued to grow, and I saved even more money. I found myself a nice, comfortable apartment. Nothing extravagant like that high-rise tower, just a regular place that felt like home. Life became peaceful. I spent my days managing my investments, pursuing hobbies, and enjoying my freedom. Then, completely out of the blue, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Turns out, I'd forgotten to block Daniel's new number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Clara! Help me!" It was Daniel, his voice frantic and desperate. "What happened?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I knew. "I screwed up, Clara, big time. That margin trading. I lost the $50,000, all of it. I'm completely in debt." "Oh dear," I replied, trying to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. "How could you just gamble like that?" "Gambling?" "But—" "You did it! You made all that money!" he stammered. "For the record, Daniel," I said coolly, "I wasn't gambling." I studied, calculated, made predictions, and invested carefully. You can't just throw money at it randomly like playing the lottery and expect to win. "No way! Clara, please, you have to come back. If this continues, we'll lose the lease on the apartment," he pleaded. I later heard from a mutual friend exactly what happened next. His parents did force him to try again, and they lost another $30,000. Of course, their beloved luxury apartment was terminated shortly after. "Lose the apartment? That's probably for the best, don't you think?" I replied calmly to Daniel's desperate plea. "You could never afford it on your own earnings anyway, and your parents convinced you to gamble again." "They keep saying I can do it next time," he cried. "Oh dear," I sighed. "You'd better stop them. But honestly, Daniel, it's no longer my business. Taking care of your parents is your responsibility now. Goodbye." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of finality. As our friend confirmed later, they did lose another $30,000, totaling $80,000 in debt. The lease on that luxurious apartment was, of course, terminated. Daniel and his family were now drowning in debt. He had to put every cent he earned towards repayment, forcing him back into the grueling work life he hated. Predictably, his mistress quickly abandoned him once the money dried up. His parents, Richard and Susan, apparently also had to find jobs to help pay off their share of the disastrous investment. It's exactly what they deserved, and frankly, I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. They certainly learned what reckless investing, or rather, gambling, was all about, though it's unlikely they'll ever save enough to try again. Meanwhile, I'm doing just fine, still making good money through careful investments. I've earned enough that I don't have to work anymore. I'm enjoying my hobbies and living a comfortable, semi-retired life. It really makes you wonder why some men look down on their capable wives instead of supporting them. He was a cheat, though, so I guess he was just an idiot who couldn't help himself. What do you think about Clara's journey? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. See you next time.